So then if that's the case, then you have to be very careful about it. What is it then that they're presenting so they can get your attention? And is it really good for your soul? Is it really good for your character? Because if you can sit there and say, oh, I can listen to this music, which has a really horrible message, and yet I won't be affected by that. You really think you won't be affected by that? Or are you so affected by it that you don't even realize that you're being affected by it? Because you're hearing the worst stuff, and yet it's just like Tuesday to you. Think about the stuff that you listen to. Think about the music that you listen to. If you guys had sons and daughters, not would you want them to listen to it, but would you want them to be the person in the song that they're talking about? Would you want them to be the character that's describing their behavior in there? Do you think that they would be a better person and that they'd have a better go in life and that they would demonstrate better character and be a better parent to their future children if they played out the things that you heard in the songs? Why do you have such a vested interest in letting entertainment off the hook? That almost sounds like a codependent relationship to me. Somebody abuses you and you're like, yeah, but, they're really nice on Wednesdays. Yeah, they're really nice, but at least they don't abuse me in a way that leaves marks. Yeah, I know that they're encouraging me to be the worst human being in the world, but at least it's got a great beat. So guard your character, man. How big? You have to be an absolute sea of virtue to receive even just a little bit of pollution without becoming polluted. Because the question isn't whether or not it's polluted. Of course it is. The question is just how badly is it polluted, and how badly are you allowing your character to be polluted that you'll put up with. And I was doing a supervision one time, and he kind of walked by, asked me how I was doing, and I said, let me ask you, Alex, you ever give this a thought? Because he did his PhD also. I asked him, what percentage of all of your thoughts that you come up with are actually original to you? In other words, like you came up with this one idea, not that you're influenced by it, not that you got it from family or friends or from television. What percentage of your thoughts do you think are actually like yours, like original to you? And he got to thinking about it, and he just said, God, I don't know, like maybe, I asked him like 1%, 2%, and he said, I think that actually might be too high. When you really realize how much influence we take in from people around us. And that's why if you come up with a really original idea, I have such incredible respect for it, because coming up with original ideas, really hard to do. Really hard to do. That's why some of these guys like Dostoevsky, or we'll see Nietzsche, they're such original, fresh thinkers that you just have to wonder, like, how did you possibly even come up with the idea? If you think about an idea like the fact that your early childhood experiences affect you in adulthood, we hear that today and we're like, well, yeah, duh, that's so obvious. But understand that for almost 300,000 years of human history, that wasn't so obvious. That's something that a few researchers about 120 years ago came up with. The whole idea of psychology and psychiatry is relatively new, man. But to us, we hear it today and we're like, God, how come no one figured that out before? Because it was an incredibly fresh, original idea. It's easy to take on the ideas of other people, and we stand on the shoulders of giants, meaning that we stand on the shoulders of the people who came before us. So we can stand on the shoulders of Sigmund Freud, and we can say, well, duh, yeah, early childhood experiences affect you in adulthood, duh. But again, there's nothing duh about that. It's an incredibly sophisticated idea. So I ask that question, like, where do we get our morals from? Where do we get our ethics from? And sometimes people will say, man, you just believe what your parents told you. You just believe what society tells you. You just believe what your friends tell you. Like, duh. Where else would we get those ideas from? It's not a bad thing. I mean, imagine if your morals and your ethics didn't align at all with society. What would you be like? Well, you'd be an outcast. Nobody would accept you. Nobody would want you around. There are some people that if they deviate just a little bit, we panic, we freak out. And then if that person comes up with some great idea, then all of a sudden we celebrate them, but only as long as the idea is useful. Or some great song, only as long as the song is popular. Or some great invention, as long as it's at the top of its field until it gets replaced by something else. And so it isn't true that we celebrate originality, because if everybody was original, there would be no society. There would be no school, there would be no civilization. We'd all be going in these completely opposite and distinct directions. And so there's nothing wrong necessarily with going along with ideas if they're right. In other words, if someone says to you, oh, like you just believe the things that you believe because your family told you. Oh, so you're gonna go out and murder then? Because according to you, you only don't murder because society says it's wrong? Well, no, that's silly. If society says murder is wrong, and you believe that murder is wrong, so those two things seem to go hand in hand. But we have to be careful with that part about what I believe, because what I believe oftentimes is not backed up by a whole lot. What society believes is backed up by hundreds, if not thousands of years of human civilization. In other words, the things that we do them because they work. We do them because they work. That doesn't mean that they're going to work forever, but we should be very careful before we come along and try to retool all of the systems of a society and get rid of all of this stuff, because it's like a Jenga puzzle. You know, Jenga, you take out one little part, is the whole thing going to collapse? I don't know. Like, what's the one thing? Is there one part of society that if we take it out or if we change it, that the whole thing could collapse? We don't know. But that's the risk that we take every time we approach society and go, let's do this. You know, let's change our ideas about this notion, or let's change our ideas about that notion. I mean, we're even at a point right now where we're arguing about the definition of male and female, he and she. Something that's absolutely obvious to biologists and has been for hundreds of thousands of years. And so as we come along now and say, let's just change this one little thing, is that the one thing that's going to bring down the Jenga puzzle? I don't know. And so, and some folks will say, well, it's okay because we'll build up a new Jenga puzzle from that. Well, yeah, maybe for the people in the future, but not for the rest of us who have to suffer a societal collapse in the process. You know, it's like if we bring about, I think when people will advocate for a revolution, well, you know, there's a big, while the revolution is going on, there's a big gap between when the revolution ends and the new system takes place. What happens in that apocalyptic gap right there? You pulled out the Jenga puzzle, the whole thing falls, or even half of it falls. And so we have to be careful about coming along and just rejecting everything that's come before us, because we don't know how sturdy that foundation really is. We know that it's worked pretty well for hundreds of thousands of years. But when we tinker with things, we don't know how they're going to turn out. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't try to change anything. All I'm saying is we have to be careful, because it isn't so easy to build things back up after you pull them down. It's way easier to tear down a Jenga puzzle than it is to reorder it and put it back together for the next game. And so there isn't necessarily anything wrong with getting our morals from our family, our friends, or from Dora. But that's the insidious one, by the way, from Dora. It really is insidious, because what that suggests to you is that a lot of your morals come from the media that we consume. And it happens in a way that it happens in the worst possible way. It happens in a way that we don't even realize it's happening, because we're being entertained in the process. So many ideas just kind of pervade because we're not paying attention, because we don't think we need to. We're just being entertained. So although your brain works, your heart is darkened with depravity. There's a distinction between what your brain is doing and what your heart is doing. And if I were to ask you, where is it that we derive our morals from? I asked that question earlier. Why is it that highly intelligent people are not necessarily the most moral? And whether Reuben realized it or not, you did get to something important there. There's a sense that when you're smarter than everybody else, if you realize you're smarter than everybody else, you think you're smarter than everybody else. And if you think that you're smarter than everybody else, then you think that the rules don't apply to you. If you think that you're prettier than everybody else, the rules don't apply to you. If you think that you're slicker than everybody else, you think that the rules don't apply to you. If you think you have more charisma than other people, we think the rules don't apply to us. It's like in any area that we excel. If you're a good enough athlete, you can think that the rules don't apply to you. And so it's not just the brain, but it's the brain that will start to rationalize. Well, because I excel in this one area, then the rules just simply don't apply to me. And so it's not even just that, but he says it's darkened with depravity. In other words, ugliness. So yeah, your brain is smart, yeah, you're intelligent, but man, your heart is darkened with ugliness. And I mean, I don't know, like, I talk about it this way. Let's say that we're sitting in a bathtub, and I look at you, and you're asking, why are we sitting in the bathtub? I go, it's only weird if you ask. And then I tell you, oh, by the way, speaking of weird, I just peed. How would you respond to that? Probably the way you should have responded immediately. No, you were going to ask the question. I peed in the bathtub that we're both sitting in right now. You gonna chill out in that bathtub still? No. And go, well, I guess the water's warm anyway, right? What are you gonna do? Probably get out of the bathtub, but you should have done in the first place. Now, if we're sitting in a pool and we're waiting in the pool, and I tell you, hey, I just peed in the pool, you'd probably, that's gross, Kevin. Just like you did in the bathtub, and you'd swim away a few feet. Yeah, but I don't know, like maybe 6 or 7 feet between us, you'd feel like you were safe from that. If we go surfing together, and we're sitting on the boards, I go, oh man, I just peed in the ocean. Dude, you're disgusting. Can't you hold your pee? Like a 10th grader. Can't you just hold it? Why would it bother you more if you were in the bathtub than if you were in the ocean? Smaller space. It's easier for it to be polluted. So it's the same pollutant, but because of the smaller space, it's more easily polluted. So I guess I would ask you that question: how big does your character have to be before it's polluted? In other words, how many negative influences do you have to allow into your mind before you'd recognize that your mind's been polluted?
Not a lot.
How many ideas have to come in while you're being entertained? Because Dora doesn't have your best interests at heart. Your family probably does. Probably. Not in all cases, of course. But they have a vested interest in you growing up to be a better person. Your friends have a vested interest in you growing up to be like them. Dora has a vested interest in you growing up watching the show so they can sell advertising dollars. Now, if you can break that down into how you start to bring the influences into your mind today, the music that you listen to, which of those categories does it fit into? The one that wants you to be a better person, the one that wants you to just get along better, or the one that is for support, or the one that gets by, or the one that just wants your attention so they can sell something.
The one that wants your attention.
Yeah. So then if that's the case, then you have to be very careful about it. What is it then that they're presenting so they can get your attention? And is it really good for your soul? Is it really good for your character? Because if you can sit there and say, oh, I can listen to this music which has a really horrible message, and yet I won't be affected by that. Do you really think you won't be affected by that? Or are you so affected by it that you don't even realize that you're being affected by it? Because you're hearing the worst stuff, and yet it's just like Tuesday to you. Think about the stuff that you listen to. Think about the music that you listen to. If you guys had sons and daughters, not would you want them to listen to it, but would you want them to be the person in the song that they're talking about? Would you want them to be the character that's describing their behavior in there? Do you think that they would be a better person, and that they'd have a better go in life, and that they would demonstrate better character and be a better parent to their future children if they played out the things that you heard in the songs? How about the movies? How about the reels? How about the TikToks? So on and so on and so on. And then, once you can sort that out, now that question becomes, what about your families? In other words, how many people, I wonder, look at their families and say, you know what, I would never raise my kids the way that I was raised. And so, and you're able to recognize the negative influences. We're so quick to recognize and almost jump on board with the idea that we've been traumatized by our families. And yet we let our friends and our entertainment completely off the hook for it. And why? We can figure it out. It's not hard to tell why. But we really want to put a lot of responsibility on here and let these other two, friends and entertainment, off the hook. Why do you have such a vested interest in letting entertainment off the hook? That almost sounds like a codependent relationship to me. Somebody abuses you and you're like, yeah, but, you know, they're really nice on Wednesdays. Yeah, they're really nice, but at least they don't abuse me in a way that leaves marks, which, by the way, I've heard from someone before. Yeah, I know that they're encouraging me to be the worst human being in the world, but at least it's got a great beat. No, but the script was really good. The special effects were outstanding. You know? So guard your character, man. How big? I mean, you have to be an absolute sea of virtue to receive even just a little bit of pollution without becoming polluted. Would you swim in an ocean with a little bit of pee in it? Maybe. How about with a little bit of oil in it? How about with microplastics in it? Would you swim in a bathtub with oil in it, microplastics in it? And so I guess I'd ask that question: how big is your character? Do you genuinely believe that your character is big enough that you can take in a little bit of oil and not become polluted? Because the question isn't whether or not it's polluted. Of course it is. The question is just how badly is it polluted? And how badly are you allowing your character to be polluted that you'll put up with? So, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Not too bad. But,